И я издатель, там, и дизайнер этой книжки, я издаю всякие другие книжки, и среди прочего у меня есть серия билингвальных поэтических сборников. Вот здесь некоторые из них есть, если интересуетесь, можно на них взглянуть. А книжка «Комиксы на этнические темы» последняя по времени издания, надеюсь, не последняя. Дальше во втором я уже договорюсь о следующих. Вот, затем я передаю микрофон, виртуальный микрофон автору.
Хорошо, спасибо. Я поняла, что у меня есть книжка с закладкой. Во-первых, живем мы в эмиграции, да, и поэтому вот, когда поэт собирает 10 человек в аудитории, это просто мировой успех. Поэтому спасибо вам всем, кто пришел. Меня спрашивали про историю этой книги, почему она называется «Комиксы», когда это не комиксы. История этой книги такова, что этот текст написан 31 уже год тому назад, и начался он в Израиле. Хотя я думаю, что, наверное, он начался значительно раньше, в сознании, какое-то такое как бы думание о том, что такое вообще идентификация, да, потому что когда я его писала в 1994 году, идея как бы identification, это была такая академическая и такая общественная как бы идея. Вот некоторые еще, по-моему, не родились в это время. Ну, не важно. Вот. Значит, что меня потрясло в Израиле в 1994 году, я там пробыла около 2 месяцев, потому что мой муж делал там скульптуру биеннале. И оказалось, что все евреи там очень разные. Совершенно все разные. Притом не в том смысле, в котором мы понимаем разность. То есть в России тоже были там разные, например, бухарские евреи, да, были там, например, балтийские евреи, немножко другие, да, были разные всякие евреи. Но вот в Израиле особенно мне показалось, что это просто какой-то такой, знаете, может быть, макрокосм еврейский. Но там были всякие разные люди. Мы жили в деревне художников. И там были стеклодувы, керамисты, там что-то кто-то делал из металла, да. И они тоже были все отовсюду, совершенно. Кто-то был из Северной Африки, кто-то был там из Южной Африки, кто-то был там из, например, какой-нибудь внук, переживших Холокост с Польши. И все это были совершенно какие-то разные люди. И, например, в этой маленькой деревне не было магазина. И, то есть он был единственный. И этот магазин держал такой франкоязычный сефардский еврей из Северной Африки. И мы к нему ходили покупать, и он нас совершенно регулярно обсчитывал. И после Америки, после 15 лет жизни в Америке, это было очень странно. А мой муж с ним разговаривал по-французски. Я ему говорю: слушай, скажи ему, зачем он обсчитывает нас на какие-то копейки? На что мой муж говорил: ты не понимаешь, это его identity. Я не могу это забрать у него, да. То есть identity вот это бывает всякое разное. И, в общем, начал складываться такой вот смешной текст, он то ли антропологический, то ли он иронический, то ли он какой-то еще всякий другой. Но вот сегодня я давала интервью на русском телевидении, и я там рассказала, что на самом деле я росла в коммунальной квартире. I'm switching it to English. Is that okay? Is that okay? Okay, so I grew up in a communal apartment in Leningrad. The apartment belonged to my father's uncle before Bolshevik Revolution. And it was a big apartment, 7 rooms, whatever. Bel etage, center of Leningrad, St. Petersburg. But then it was, after the revolution, it was this process of уплотнения. I don't know how do we translate that. Все знают это уплотнение, да? when I think that it was one of the Kamenev, was it, maybe, who just sort of who got this idea that all these bourgeoisie have too much square meters, and we need to put workers there and soldiers there and this and that. And so the uncle of my father got very, very scared of these workers and soldiers and who knows who these people are. And he sent telegrams to the shtetls he was from and his relatives were from. And he invited young, poor people, because at that time you could come to this capital to live in was already Leningrad, probably, right? And so this apartment had some cousins and uncles and relatives and so forth. But when I was born, which is after the war, right, Second World War, it's interesting that when I say in Europe after the war, everybody understands. But when I say after the war in America, you really need to explain what war. This apartment still was Jewish, but no relatives, because some people were arrested in NEP time, some people were purged during Stalin's time, some people perished during the Second World War, some people, who knows what, right? So, so we didn't have relatives anymore, but it was this Jewish 25 people, all very, very different. It was a pianist who worked in the conservatory, it was a doctor, it was an engineer, it was a woman whose father had oil, who was the owner of this oil production in Baku, in Azerbaijan. And everybody died in the family, and she worked as a cashier in the pharmacy, right? So they were all kinds of different people. It was all, and the only person religious was there. He was a director of garage of big trucks. He was religious, and he was completely sadistic with his children, especially the older son. So, in spite of his religiosity, that otherwise I would probably respect, right? I just hated his guts, right, as a child. And every time when he started this terrible execution of his older son, I was knocking at the door and saying, in our country, we don't beat children. Yeah. But it did not help. And so then I was knocking at the door and saying, the telephone is ringing, it's for you. So, I think that was probably the foundation for, and of course, it's this big apartment, so my mother was pretty suspicious, and then she thought that this person is the informer. The person who was like calculating how much people need to pay for electricity, gas, telephone, and so forth, right? Did anybody grow up in a communal apartment here, or that is not?
Things got no, but they read books. We know what the Voronezh Slobodka is.
So anyway, so those are sources of this book. The title, Komikсы, of course, this is not a comics book in a strictly speaking technical genre, right? But I think that because many words in different language, they mean something else. So I just borrowed this word, and I do make drawings. And sometimes I make drawings as an outsider artist, and sometimes I make something more sophisticated. So these drawings probably also has a history. I grew up in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and as a child I was going to the Hermitage a lot. And in Hermitage we have this room which is called in Russian Generалы 12-го года. And it was generals, military generals who fought in Napoleon War, Russian generals, right? And they were very funny actually because they were very primitively done, sort of like a folk paintings like this, you know, always Axelbante and you know some. Anyway, so in any place you go, you see these male portraits, right? You know, presidents of the university, or I studied at the history department of Leningrad University. We had all these professors, mostly male. You go to any institution and you see these kind of galleries of male portraits. So in this room there is a gallery of female Jewish intellectuals, okay? So Hannah Arendt, Gertrude Stein, Susan Sontag, and some stars. Excuse me? Some stars like Simone Signoret or yes, please. And there are some facsimile pages from my journals. And also there are drawings that are also, they belong to my dear friend who lives now in Portugal. And they were made at the very early 90s, and they have all these kind of funny things. I will try to maybe read some. I am an immigrant poet without a biography. I have a Jewish, Russian, and American biography, and a female and family law. English is not my native language. So anyway, I'm very grateful to Ilya, who without hesitation read the text and said, we will have a book. This book was, this text in Russian was published 3 times in my 3 different books. But in English, somehow it was translated brilliantly in 2011, and we presented that in the Magnus collection, maybe the following year. And it was discussed academically, and many people praised it, but for some reason nobody had an idea where I can publish it. And so, you know, probably this moment when I really wanted to publish it, I really tried the journal tablet, if you know, right, and other periodicals. It did not happen, but it happened now. So this is the first publication in English. It's a bilingual book, and I can maybe read. And you know, in English, I think I would prefer that somebody who doesn't speak with an accent.
Наоборот. А ваши гости будут следить за переводом?
This is possible. This is possible.
Можете объявлять страницу.
This is possible.
For me.
You can follow.
Sadly, I don't have an accent. I wish. Not a Russian one.
Может быть, то же самое?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, we can take turns.
Yeah.
У меня тоже нет русского акцента.
So don't worry about it. Just read it from the way convenient
Кажется,
to you.
лучше все-таки прочесть по-русски, поскольку
Я тоже
это
так.
оригинальный текст. Can follow by the translation. Номер страницы.
Совсем
так,
немножко
понимаете?
я вам читаю, правда. Мою мать звали Сарой,
Page
но отца
16.
звали не Авраамом.
17.
Мои родители не были Авраамом и Сарой, но по рождении все равно евреями оказались. Такой народ имеет место в природе, проживает в стране прародителей и в разных других странах на карте. Отсюда широкий спектр различий внутри самого этого народа. Мой народ имеет своих предков, семьи, детей, родителей, внуков и других родственников, Старый Завет, его толкования, религию, предметы культа, книги, историю, хронологию, коллективное бессознательное, коллективное сознательное, стадное чувство, пол и возраст. Некоторым присуща повышенная ранимость, болезненный индивидуализм, всем и каждому без исключения, как родовой признак, свойственно мышление травмы, большой скептицизм на предмет собственного этноса, распространяющийся на самого себя. Наблюдается также сопротивление феномена принадлежности и в то же время неудержимое желание принадлежать. Имеет место склонность преувеличивать свои комплексы неполноценности, они же превосходства, и их тоже преувеличивать, казаться себе хуже других, казаться себе лучше других и казаться себе совершенно такими же, ничем не отличающимися от других. В домашних условиях и в социальном поведении случаются проявления сострадания, великодушия, мазохизма и обратной ему крайности садизма. Некоторым из нас свойственно религиозное чувство, мифологическое мышление, суеверия, предубеждения разного характера, а также относительно собственного и чужих народов, и особенно по отношению к власти. Некоторые из нас, евреев, склонны считать ее всемогущей и ждать от нее чудес прямо, или в ней пытаются сами практиковаться, упражняться в действиях с позиции силы. А некоторые склонны считать ее власть совершенно ни на что хорошее неспособной и стараются всеми силами держаться от нее подальше. Большинство же народа располагается между ними. Но есть и совершенно свободные от предубеждений. Есть среди моего народа и такие, которым совсем ничем не интересуются, даже политикой, демонстрируют узость взглядов, косность, консерватизм, фундаментализм, патриархальность, газет не читают, новости не смотрят. Есть настроенные мистические и ложно-мистические, есть подозрительные, есть фаталисты, во всем им видится судьба, провидение, фортуна, а есть такие, которым фатализм ненавистен. Есть верующие и есть ни во что не верующие, ничего для них святого. Есть среди моего народа интересующиеся всем на свете, без международных новостей, заснуть не могут, широких взглядов, открытые к новому, способные к изменению, психологически эволюционирующие. Есть циники, а есть те, для которых цинизм, особенно интеллектуальный, непереносим. Нетленное называют нетленкой, великое величкой, духовное духовкой, вечное вечкой, как будто говорят на другом языке. И иностранными тоже владеют. Ну и так далее. Он довольно короткий, этот page. Текст. And I think that it is a performative text, right? It is written as an oral tradition, like you can rather deliver it orally than read on a page. Ask me questions. Let's talk. Let's talk.
Any question or literally based question? And historical. So, when talking about specifics of your apartment filled with Jews after the war, didn't draw any attention from the MGB in 49 and 49-51 when they started looking for Jewish conspiracy all over the former Soviet Union?
Well, you know, I'm not following that. I don't think so. I don't think
you don't remember anything?
I don't think I follow that. I think that there were so many fantasies, right? And I know that, to my great surprise, some of my close friends were on the board of what is this organization, very anti-Semitic in Leningrad, you know.
That was
Память.
Pamять, memory,
yeah.
right? So they were my close friends, they were dissident artists, and all of a sudden I see them there as very active members, right?
But the panic was later, and they started looking for their identity in late 80s, right?
They probably were looking for some identity, but you know, that was a very scary time in the Soviet
Correct.
Union. I fortunately left much before that. I must tell you that when I came back 16 years after I left, right, in '94, I read some text, this text concretely, and some other very feminist text at Nabokov's house. And it was pretty a lot of people, like really good audience. So when I read this text, my Russian friends, they laughed. My Jewish friends, they had these red cheeks and teary eyes. Because it was not still not like possible to publicly speak about Jewish questions. And I know several, now I know many of these things, right? Like for instance, there is a writer, Tatiana Horkina in Moscow, very good writer, but not the person who publishes. She is a blogger. And she wrote this story about the early 90s. She lived in the suburbs of Moscow. And at some point she noticed the announcement that in a movie theater that it's going to be a concert of the Far East Дальневосточная, the group of musicians and singers, the Jewish ensemble. So they bought tickets. So when they went to this Sofia, the movie theater, she saw that crowd of people, all the Jews from, you know, these areas, came to this movie theater, and somebody joked that it could be very easily performed with Final Solution, right? In this movie theater. And then the group of these musicians, all very much, very poorly dressed, kind of beaten by life, you know. But they were singing in Yiddish, and like it was a music and so forth and so forth. The whole audience were crying. People were not accustomed to that. Jews were hidden in the Soviet Union, you know. I mean, if you want to be a playwright, you need to change your name Rabinovich into Zorin, etc. So like writers, etc., etc. So that was this interesting time in my life. But I do remember that quite well, you know.
You left in when?
I left in '78.
I guess we could say things about late 80s and early 90s. That was little relief, but not exactly, you know, breathe-freely time. Of course, everybody was hanging around Archipovay 16 near the synagogue during the holidays.
It was a renaissance of the
Yeah,
Soviet.
that was a, you know, good time. But even that time, you could see the people standing on the side, making pictures of everybody who came. So.
What do we want from the Soviet authorities?
No, that was just another thing to just
Sure.
laugh.
No, sure, absolutely, absolutely. So this is like, you know, very, I think that I wrote that probably as a therapeutic text. Something came out of it, right? Something that I faced already, I could face, I could verbalize. I don't think that I was able to do anything like that when I was leaving Russia. I had a history degree, which is laughable now, right? And I remember this moment when I left, and it was a pretty sad moment, right? So in Vienna, the representative of Hayes asked me, Marina, why are you so sad? And I said, but you know, I left my mom, my brother, like friends, the city, all this. And she told me, you know, we are such people that our grandchildren don't speak the same language like the grandparents. And this was so healing for me, you know, although this is exactly what I would not like to happen, to happen with my family, yes. For me, Russian language was like a transitional object. I was like, this is what I want my language, I don't want anything else. I'm not interested in money, in this and that, but I want to continue writing. And so, right. I think that there, in Vienna, I think I realized how different the Soviet Jews are. Because we were all like, my group of people, we were put in a hotel which was called Zum Turken, for Turks, right? And the owners of this business, they were Holocaust survivors, it's a couple with the numbers. They were the most horrible people in my life. They did not turn on the electricity or gas, so like babushkas, like grandmothers wanted to make kasha for the babies, like etc. You know, all kinds of people, right? We are like that. So my son criticized me when he read this text, and he said, you deprive Jewish people from being chosen.
That's
Do
overrated.
I?
That's overrated.
Do I?
No,
I wanted to ask about what you read. What's the, no, let's say, main idea of this part of the book? For me, it sounds like you can say the same about any ethnicity. Absolutely the same, right?
I believe so,
Or
but I think that, you know, Jewish people are so mythologized. You know, they are wrapped in so many, all kinds of mythologies, you know. So my idea was to unwrap this, you know. This is a very interesting text. It kind of was written as a blurb, but on page 134 by Ilya Bukulin, who is himself a poet, critic, cultural historian and professor. So this is what he writes. Тёмкина одновременно обсуждает сложный вопрос и пародирует такое исследование. Соединение иронии и серьезности соответствует поставленной автором задаче. Она одновременно неразрешимая и захватывающая. И житейский опыт, и современные представления историков и антропологов свидетельствуют, в одном этносе могут существовать очень разные люди, и попытки найти его вневременную сущность обречены на провал. Поэтому вот это ответ на ваш вопрос, что да, наверное, это так.
Как сказал когда-то Бен-Гурион, да, когда в нашей стране будут проститутки и воры, тогда мы будем настоящее государство.
Абсолютно.
Я хочу еще добавить, okay, I'll speak English. It's all mostly true for diaspora, you know, for my opinion, because when you're in Israel for a few years, right? It's happening very fast, actually. You stop thinking about all this stuff. Completely. You just, like everybody else in your country, and you stop thinking about Jewish, all this we were thinking all our lives in Russia, right? That's That's my experience, and I heard a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, you integrate there and you are buying the kind of that, this is this famous phrase, right, that не Израиль вас нуждается, а вы нуждаетесь в Израиле.
Yes.
Not Israel who needs you, you need Israel, right? This was kind of post-Holocaust ideas, right? I don't know what is it now. Is it like that or is it different? But
We'll see.
I think that in Vienna it was this kind of office that everybody should go through, explaining why we don't go to Israel, right? Coming from the Soviet Union and having Israeli visa,
Yeah.
right? And so I remember that we were very lucky with my husband and my son, who was at that time 8 years old. And the person was also from Leningrad. And first he yelled at us and screamed and tried to convince us that this is what we should do and so forth. And then it appeared that he studied in the same class with my brother. He asked me about that because this is my maiden name, right? And so then he stopped being stupid, and he told us that this is because these people like you don't go to Israel. Israel is like that. Okay, so was it a compliment? I still don't know.
I still don't know why really people don't go to Israel. I still don't understand that.
Well,
What was that?
well, I don't know. My own explanation is that I was married at that time, first time, and my husband grew up till 6 years old in Leningrad, but then his parents got a job in, his father was a military doctor, so then he lived in Baku, in Azerbaijan. And so for him, this type of climate and, you know,
Yeah.
also to live again in the very Muslim environment, he didn't want that. He didn't want that because he already had this experience, right? Maybe this experience wasn't that bad for him, right? Then he went and entered conservatory in Moscow. But he never wanted to deal neither with this climate, nor he missed snow, he missed cold. Yes, he was always saying that.
Vostok.
Right, Vostok Beltong.
Yeah, exactly.
The East is a very subtle thing. So, yeah. So you know, there is no why in many decisions. But people like migrate, they go.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who came to Israel, then didn't feel like it's the right place for them. They left, but okay.
In the Russian language diaspora now, especially beginning from the Ukrainian war in Ukraine, there are many different ethnic groups, and families are mixed. You know, there are many ethnically Russian people,
Yeah.
and I remember this scandal. What war was it? Then Christian kids, you know, from the Christian mothers, Russian-speaking mothers, were killed in action, but they could not be buried in the military cemeteries with the Jewish soldiers because they were not Jewish.
No, but my parents were in the Russian cemetery in Israel.
There would be always
But that's
controversy
fine.
with
That's
the mixed
okay.
families. So that is to be expected, unfortunately. That's very sad to learn about this.
It's not
But
sad.
it's
life.
it's-
We cannot be sad because of that, you know?
There is rules in the country and they follow the rules, but whatever we like it or not, right? So that's how it.
My husband, for instance, he's French, right? And I had my two first books were published in France, so before I met him. Actually, the Europe, but this book, my early book, this is his cover. He made the cover, right? This. Okay, so this. Okay, so this is 89. Спасибо. То есть это такой почерк увеличенный, да? So, anyway, I've never would imagine how French intellectuals hate Catholicism. I mean, hysterically, they don't want to go to any church, even if it is a museum or something. So they need to overcome something, you know, like. Excuse me. Every culture has something, you know, like. You need to be an insider to understand it. So, please. For instance, I can tell you that I think that this is always like a question, right? Pasternak with his evangeliski cycle, right? Like Marie Yudina with the big cross, right? These Jews, right? Who got their education before Bolsheviks. I think that they are sort of their desire to keep something real from the old Russian culture, translated into that, okay, to go to church, because that was the most destroyed part of the culture, right? About 40,000 of Russian priests were killed in Gulag. That's not a joke, right? So, it is interesting. It's also very interesting to think about who is going to be our mayor. Right? Very interesting. Very interesting. We elected Lenin. Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know.
You came in 78. You've seen what it was here. You came to New York City. You probably remember how the city was in 78, right?
I felt much more comfortable there, I think. But first of all, it was a paradise for the poor.
Compared to
now. Yes, it was a paradise for the poor. I paid for 2-bedroom in Kew Gardens, which is a beautiful area, $325.
of course.
Right? So, and you could trust people, right? You could trust the Lord. It was before this corporate life, nationally corporate. I don't know. I was probably idealizing a lot. As an immigrant, I was probably, right?
And at this point, if I'm not mistaken, the city was in the age of the bankruptcy, and things were really not good. And, you know, that's a very dynamic city. It goes like this. So.
Right. America generally. But I was, you know, I must tell you that in Russia, I never was Russian. In my birth certificate, I was Jewish. In my passport, which I got when I was 16, I was Jewish. In the teacher's journal, where all students are there, so 90% of the people are Jewish and Russian, and one is Armenian, and one is Ukrainian, and one is Jewish. So then I applied for the university. We were actually like suggested not to go to the morning classes, but to apply for the evening. It was one of these wars in Israel, and not one Jewish student was accepted into the humanities. And so then, after the university, I still tried to get some jobs. I knew for sure that I don't want to teach history in schools, that I don't want to lie to children. So I went to like several organizations, right? And every time it was very nice, very wonderful interviews, HR people, right? But so when it came to, okay, give me your passport, I will start like processing your papers. So they looked at the passport and said, you know, I should go and ask, because I think that maybe this position is taken already.
I was born much later. Right?
Sure.
And I never experienced that, but again, I never managed to participate in anything state related. So I got into college, I told my friend who wanted me to go to Moscow University, that's like, don't even think about it because you will be admitted. I would be not. So I give him a little spiel about the difference between Jews and Russian. And he told me, okay, so let's go to a different one, which is like same distance. Surprisingly, I was admitted there, but after that, I graduated and I left, so I never experienced that. So what I'm saying is, that old knowledge of you not being accepted, did it affect you mentally? So is book results of this? So you kind of managed to build the wall.
Defenses. But I also built my defenses when they started calling me Russian in America.
Oh, that's very, I did the same, exactly the same thing. Yeah.
I did not want that. But now I'm fine with it, I guess. Right? But it was not comfortable because it sounded like a lie, right?
Yeah.
But I think that also, we to some extent, my generation of people and my immigration, we remain who we were because the American Jewish community didn't accept us either. They did not offer any classes, anything, to kind of educate us ethnically. Whereas when Perestroika started, many people went to Russia and started teaching Jewish values and Jewish studies and all of this. And in Russia, it was this little renaissance. That is absolutely true,
Marina, I think speaking about whether they offered or didn't offer any Jewish education here, I think here it would have been religious, synagogue, religion, and so it was free. Any one of us could have gone, and there were classes, but most Soviet immigrants weren't interested in religion, they were repulsed by it. Therefore they didn't. But they could have, it was open to them. It wasn't closed here.
This is very true, but that's what makes us interesting, because we are not the believers, and we are a little bit of socialist. We are the atheist people, right? We are, I wouldn't say that I'm just this radical leftist, but I'm pretty left, and so forth. And so, yes, maybe I tried to put my son into the religious school, Jewish school. I came with him, that was like in front of my building in Kew Gardens. These rabbis and teachers looked at me like that. They were not very friendly. and they asked me what do we practice and who is circumcised and who is not. And do we know this and that? And I decided that I had it in the Soviet Union. Thank you very much, man.
Interesting.
Okay?
But is it also maybe kind of like a European intellectual cultural tradition, right? That's more kind of a 19th century intellectual tradition too, right? That
It's
doesn't
mostly
really.
Soviet, in the Soviet Union was an atheist country.
Yeah.
Atheism
No,
was
I know,
within-
but I think like in terms of like people that were doing humanities or writing or something like that, it's another kind of tradition that's different than American Jewish
But mainly,
ethos kind of.
we were from the Soviet Union. We spent, Marina spent her whole life there. So the Soviet Union was not, there was no religion.
Oh, I know.
It was very deeply
No, I'm saying something
ingrained
very
in us.
different. Yeah, no, I'm just saying like the intellectual kind of like cultural history, is maybe
So
strong,
trying
as strong as
right,
religion.
trying to get religious education after growing up in Soviet Union was,
But
for majority was really a strange thing.
Yeah,
Because we were
that's what
secular.
I'm saying. Yeah,
we were
that's my
But it's not
secular.
because European intellectual. Actually, many Russian
don't think it's the
became
same for
intellectual.
В этой книге
Well,
не отражено.
well, there is such a thing as the Soviet Union was a closed country. You
Yeah.
know, it was you couldn't travel between Moscow and Paris just like that.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
but
It's
there's a modernist Russian
I
tradition.
would
no?
probably say
Я очень много
in
знаю
Russia,
людей, которые были совсем
the
теперь
religion was really
не
not
те
a
в Москве, те
thing
самые
which
вот.
people would attend.
Yeah.
In
Можно я
Просто
тогда
они-
other,
просто они- это не
in other places
пересекающиеся
like
Нет,
Ukraine,
Илья, можно я
Belarus,
вступлю? Можно я
Прибалтиcs.
вступлю тоже? Да, да. Нет, вы
the people
абсолютно
were more
правы.
religious
Можно
because
я
they fought.
еще скажу
Of
только
course.
два слова? Когда
Sorry.
мне было 15 лет, и что у меня есть брат, которому в это время было уже 25, да. И он, so when I was 15, my brother was 25, and he started attending history seminar, which was underground. So the first thing it was to study, the idea was to study history not by the Soviet books. Because in many houses, like, families, some Braughausen in the front and some other books, right? So you can use other sources. Very quickly, this seminar, history seminar, became a Jewish seminar. And the leader of the seminar, Leputevsky, he lives in Israel and so forth. So I attended this seminar. All of these people immigrated to Israel at some point in the 70s. Many of them became religious. Some of them married rabbis in Israel and so forth. So this is very much in my experience as well,
Я думаю, что каждый человек, прошу прощения за русский, встречает то, чего ожидает. Я это много раз наблюдаю. Именно поэтому, я думаю, все ваши столкновения с, например, с миром религиозных евреев, они такие, рисуются в таких саркастических тонах. И они не дружественные, и они бьют детей, и не знаю, что еще.
Не все.
В рассказе были только эти.
Yeah, no,
Совершенно не все. Not to everything. What Ilya is saying that we see what we expect. Okay? He said, so my encounters with religious people were rather negative, right? But not all of them. Absolutely not all of them. Not all of them.
I have a similar experience when we wanted to get a bar mitzvah for my son, and my husband went to the synagogue and talked to the rabbi, and he said, "Your wife, she's a Goya." And my husband said, "No, we had a chuppah."
Почему?
А?
У тебя, по-моему, все в порядке с Аллахой.
Exact. Ah?
С Аллахой у тебя все в порядке.
No, Rabbi thought that I'm shiksa,
well, he
I don't
thought
know.
something, he was mistaken, but
Yeah, but he saw me many times inside synagogue, so... Oh, and... I want to say it's very important thing for me because, once at that time when we were making bar mitzvah for my son, a friend of mine, and I told her, "Oh, we're having bar mitzvah," and she said, "What? Why?" there is nothing Jewish in your family. You know, I was, I didn't know what to say, because what do you mean nothing Jewish? We are Jewish. No, you don't have,
Right.
I don't know, Torah, you don't have
Mezuzah.
mezuzah. Yeah, actually we do, because before, when we when we bought our apartment,
But this
previous owners had mezuzah.
But we are such Jews, we don't have it.
You know, that's the question. And I said, how can you decide how I identify myself? How can you decide that? That's my story.
You know, I think that what is very important is to hear all voices. I think that my change of consciousness, I think, the very deep one, was when I worked for the Shaw Foundation interviewing Holocaust survivors. I did it for 3 years. To tell you that it was an easy job, I cannot, but we didn't make more than one interview per week, two interviews per week sometimes. It absolutely changed me, I would say, biologically. First of all, I think that I try to explain to myself, why do I do that? It's really hard. And then I thought that I do it because it is a survival. But what kind of survival and what is it survival, etc., right? Because in these 3 years, what I realized that survival is completely random. It's completely occasional. It's not because somebody is healthier and somebody is stronger and somebody is wealthier and somebody is from the peasant family and strong and somebody is whatever. This is completely occasional, and everybody I interviewed, told me that. Okay, but my siblings died and I did not. Right? So, but interviewing in 2 languages, I also realized that our community is very interesting community. At that time, in mid-90s, right? We still had actors from Gasset theater,
Really?
Jewish theater in Moscow, right? We still had 90 years old Yiddish poets who really wrote poetry, okay? And at some point they were known people, but then they became silent. Maybe they wrote something, but in Stalin's time it was not possible, right? So we had people scientists, brilliant people, who worked in Sharashki. In Gulag, they worked in these secret, раковый корпус, I don't know.
В круге первом.
Или в круге
Круге
первом, да,
первом.
in the first circle.
Yeah, in the first story.
My
It's
father's
Solzhenitsyn,
friend was one of the 3 people mentioned in в круге первом. His real name in real life was Panin. He lived in Paris in immigration. I don't know, do you know him? No, Panin? There were 3, one was, gosh, I'm very bad with names. Anyway, I can tell you later. There were 3 in в круге первом by Solzhenitsyn. It's a novel by Solzhenitsyn. There were 3 prisoners who were working in this prison. They were scientists, but they were used in Gulag. They were used, like slave scientists,
but
right?
they were working.
Yeah, and I have to look up their name. One was what's his name? He's the grandfather of my friend Dima Litvinov, but I forgot. I'll look it up later. Anyway, my parents knew 2 of them very closely, but I think they died one died in the early 90s, the other died in the late 70s.
So what I want to say that it was a very interesting immigration, right? And we organized with a group of people, with somebody's mother, with my friends, artists and writers and scholars, a non-profit organization, the Archive for Jewish Immigrant Culture, because we are Russian-speaking Jews. We are the biggest immigrant community in America, okay? And I assumed the responsibilities of the president because I was the only person who did not work full time at that time. I did not know where I go. Because the president in the American non-profit world means that the person who is raising money. And what kind of fundraiser am I, right? So I took some seminars and classes and this and that, and then I wrote proposals and so forth. So I'm a failed fundraiser. But I tried for 10 years. And one of our projects was to interview women, Jewish women who fought in the Soviet army during the Second World War. Because females' memory is a little different. And we discovered that there were a lot of women in the Soviet army. And all figures, numbers that officially Soviet government gave, right, about the army was absolutely false. The women were pilots, and they were in the tanks, and they were snipers, and they were, of course, doctors and nurses and cooks and all this stuff. The secretaries and all kinds of telephonists, right, like these communication people.
Signal.
So they were a lot of women, and some of them were our babushkas, grandmothers on Brighton Beach.
Did you ever publish this? Did you ever publish this document?
No, we did not do anything because I made some like sample interviews with some of them, but I did not raise money. I became like completely poor, like a church mouse, you know, and you know, my biggest problem in that was not even to work without money, but to run after rich Americans and explain to them, trying to explain to them that Soviet or Russian Jews exist. Because, excuse me, what Russian Jews? Our grandparents came from Ukraine and Russia and Empire, and you know, so it was like this interesting disappointment in mutual disappointment, because I think that they expected us to be these traditional Jews with a prayer book, with a goat. They did not know who we were. You know, they thought that they are receiving their grandparents, right? And we were people from the big cities with higher education, most of us, right?
Because we were not really in the know that the Pale was gone, and some people moved west, and majority
Academicians
moved.
did, you know, academics did, but not average American. No, not average American Jew, no.
Could not
And I
expect it.
must say that we too, we were very disappointed. I mean, like, what is this? Corporate America, you know, like, they kept us for 6 weeks, go find a job, right? So it was quite interesting.
So I guess we're running out of time, right? Because I have another question.
Yes,
У нас
please.
есть
So,
еще полчаса.
yes, so I mean, in my opinion, when we grew up in Soviet Union, we were raised to be very categorical. Like, life was either white or black. Like, we were told what's good, we were told what's bad, this is good, this is bad, and it actually affected us because everybody who I know, nobody was like, you know, half toned. Everybody was very categorical, and it took me tremendous amount of time here to start looking for both point of views. Like, not everything is white and not everything is black. In your experience, how did, how long it was for you? Or you never been this way?
I think that back there in Leningrad, I read one article which described alternative thinking or integrated thinking. What you say, either or, black and white, etc. Right? So I think that I got the concept very early in my life. I don't know if I could implement it, but I think that I got the concept that alternative thinking is not the ideal one, let's say, right? That pluralistic opinions are not either or, black and white, right? And so I think that this helped me. And then I must tell you that I grew up in a very anti-Soviet family. Absolutely. My immediate family, my mother always spoke about the government, эти бандиты, they're bandits.
Lucky you.
And I think that most of our parents were not very fond of the government, of the Soviet government, right?
Your mother was afraid. I'm sorry, my mother was afraid. She was always afraid for me.
Very afraid. She would never say that publicly. But at home, definitely. Even my brother was this guy who would, how do we say that in English? There is no translation, right? Underground literature. So he was like shifting it from friend to friend to friend. Sometimes I think, I wonder if he read it, but I definitely did. So I read, for instance, he gave me when I was 11 the letter of Fyodor Raskolnikov to Stalin, and I read. But of course I was not interested about these military terms or what is this militarization or whatever, like these big words. But what I did understand is that that was a language of truth, intonation, how it sounded, right? Because it was very little of the truth in what you can hear, except from the literature.
We have to go. Lovely.
I knew from my childhood that I cannot speak at school when I hear and
Well, I kind of knew it, but I still did.
This
It's
is mine,
surprising
too.
how I managed.
сколько стоит?
Тебе 10. 15.
I think that I am, to some extent, right, but being a therapist. But there is something there in this topic, which is always Jewish question. Be it the situation now in Israel, or be it situation now with our new mayor, that nobody knows what will happen, right? So, it's interesting. So I think that it's not occasional that this text is published now in two languages. It might have some meaning, you know.
Еще немножко прочтете?